Carter Brooks had never been afraid of old houses. That changed on the night he inherited Ashwood Manor. The mansion stood alone at the edge of a frozen valley in rural Montana. No neighbors, no streetlights, no towns for miles, just endless forests and mountains stretching into darkness. The house had belonged to Carter's grandfather, a man he barely remembered. After the funeral, the lawyer handed Carter a small brass key and a single envelope. Inside the envelope was a note. Never sleep near the north wall. Burn this letter after reading. Carter laughed when he read it. He assumed it was some strange joke from a paranoid old man. Unfortunately, he was wrong. The first snowstorm arrived the same day he moved into the mansion. Heavy winds battered the roof. Tree branches scraped against the windows. The old house groaned constantly, as if something enormous moved inside its walls. By midnight, Carter was unpacking boxes in the master bedroom. The room felt strangely cold, much colder than the rest of the house, especially near the north wall, the same wall mentioned in the letter. A long crack stretched from floor to ceiling. Carter examined it briefly before returning to work. Outside, snow covered everything. Inside, silence slowly settled over the mansion. At 1:17 a.m., he heard the first knock. Knock, knock. The sound came from inside the wall. Carter stopped moving. The knock-in came again. 3 slow knocks, then silence. Probably old pipes, that was his first thought. The mansion was over 100 years old. Old houses made noises. Nothing unusual. He continued unpacking. 10 minutes later, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly 3 knocks. Exactly the same rhythm. This time it sounded closer, as if whatever produced it stood directly behind the wall. Carter stared at the crack. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. He waited. Nothing happened. Eventually, he convinced himself it was just the wind. At 2 a.m., he finally went to bed. The storm outside grew stronger. Snow slammed against the windows. The trees screamed beneath powerful gusts. Sleep came slowly. Then, something woke him. A whisper. Very close. Close enough to touch. Carter opened his eyes. The room was dark. For several seconds he lay motionless, listening. The whisper came again. A man's voice. Soft. Breathy. Almost impossible to understand. The sound originated from the north wall. Carter sat upright. The whisper continued. A low stream of words sliding through the darkness. He couldn't make out the language. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything he recognized. His skin crawled. The voice sounded as though someone stood inside the wall itself, talking, waiting, watching. Then the whisper stopped. Complete silence returned. Carter switched on the bedside lamp. Nothing. The room appeared empty. The crack remained where it had always been. Thin, harmless, normal. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something stood on the other side. Something breathing. Something listening. Morning eventually arrived. The storm had buried the valley beneath several feet of snow. The mansion looked isolated from the rest of the world. Carter spent the day exploring the property. The place was enormous. More than 40 rooms, long hallways, dust-covered staircases, locked doors, forgotten storage areas. The deeper he explored, the stranger the mansion became. Several rooms had no windows. Others appeared to serve no purpose. One corridor ended abruptly at a blank wall, as if a section of the house had been removed. Late that afternoon, Carter discovered something odd in the basement. Blueprints. Old architectural drawings stored inside a metal cabinet. He spread them across a table. The mansion's design made no sense. Several spaces shown on the blueprints didn't exist. Entire rooms were missing, hidden, sealed away. One area especially caught his attention. A narrow passage stretching inside the walls themselves. A maze running throughout the mansion. Large enough for a man to crawl through. Carter frowned. Why would anyone build that? The answer never came. That night another snowstorm arrived. The temperature dropped sharply. Darkness swallowed the valley. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. Carter was already awake. This time the sound came from directly behind his bed. Knock, knock, knock. The wall vibrated slightly. His heartbeat accelerated. Someone was definitely there. Someone inside the wall. The knocking continued. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. Then, suddenly, it stopped. A new sound replaced it. Scratching. Slow. Deliberate. Something dragged across the inside surface of the wall. Carter grabbed a flashlight. The scratching followed him as he approached, step by step. The closer he moved, the louder it became. The sound ended beside the crack, right beside it. Carter aimed the flashlight into the thin opening. Darkness. Nothing but darkness. Then an eye opened. Carter stumbled backward. The eye stared directly at him from inside the wall. Pale, cloudy, inhuman. The pupil was far too large. The skin surrounding it looked gray and rotten. The eye never blinked, never moved. It simply watched. Watching, waiting, smiling somehow despite having no mouth. Carter's body locked in terror. The eye remained there for several seconds, then vanished. The scratching immediately resumed, moving away, retreating deeper into the darkness, hidden behind the wall. Carter didn't sleep again. At sunrise, he searched the entire mansion. Every room, every hallway, every attic corner. Nobody. No signs of intruders. No hidden entrances. No footprints in the snow. Nothing. But that evening, he found something else. A journal, hidden beneath loose floorboards in his grandfather's study. The pages were yellow with age. The final entry had been written only 3 days before his grandfather died. The handwriting trembled violently. It lives in the walls. I hear it every night. It knows my name, wears faces now. I think it wants a new home. If Carter ever reads this, do not let it see you sleep. Do not answer if it speaks with my voice, and never follow the knocking. Carter stared at the final sentence. A cold feeling settled in his stomach, because as he read those words, the sound came from directly behind him, inside the study wall, closer than ever before. And this time a voice followed, a familiar voice, his grandfather's voice. Carter, come find me. Carter didn't move. Not because he was thinking, because his body simply refused to obey him. The voice inside the wall had stopped speaking, but it had not left. It remained in the room like a pressure in the air, like something invisible pressing against his ears from the inside. Come find me, his grandfather's voice. Dead men are not supposed to call you from inside walls. Carter stood in the dim study, staring at the thin crack in the north wall. The house outside groaned once, long, slow, like a tired animal shifting in its sleep. He took one step closer, then another. The flashlight trembled slightly in his hand, casting uneven light across the wood paneling. The crack looked unchanged, small, harmless, almost normal again. But Carter no longer believed in normal, because normal things do not whisper. Knock. The sound hit directly behind him. Carter spun instantly. Nothing. Only the study door, slightly open, and the hallway beyond it sinking into darkness. He swallowed hard. Hello? He called quietly. Stupid question. No answer. He stepped out of the study slowly, keeping the wall in his peripheral vision, as if it might move when he wasn't looking. The hallway felt longer than before. Not physically longer, just wrong. As if the house had stretched itself while he wasn't paying attention. He walked toward the kitchen. Every step made the floor creak in unfamiliar ways. Not random creaks, rhythmic ones, like the house was trying to match his footsteps. In the kitchen, he turned on the light. It flickered once, then stabilized. The single bulb hung above the table like a weak eye watching him. Carter sat down. He tried to breathe normally. In, out. But the air felt thicker now. He looked at his hands. They were shaking slightly. He hated that. Not fear, lack of control. That was worse than fear. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time inside the house had started to feel unreliable. The storm outside grew louder. Wind slammed against the windows like something trying to get in. At exactly 3:04 a.m., the kitchen light dimmed. Not fully off, just weaker, like someone had placed a hand over the bulb. Carter looked up slowly. The bulb was still intact, still glowing, but now it felt far away, as if the light source had retreated deeper into the ceiling. He stood up. "Okay," he whispered. "Bad wiring, old house." Just bad wiring. Even he didn't believe the sentence. The light flickered again. Once, twice, then returned weaker than before. The shadows in the corners grew deeper. He turned toward the hallway, and that's when he heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Carter froze, slow, measured, not rushing, not wandering, walking. He looked up at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped directly above him. The kitchen light flickered again. This time, it did not recover fully. Half the room sank into shadow. Carter slowly reached into the drawer and pulled out a kitchen knife. It felt ridiculous in his hand, a thin metal object against something that didn't even behave like a normal house. Still, he held it, because humans need something to hold when reality breaks. The footsteps started again, but now there was dragging, something heavy being pulled across the upstairs floor. Not furniture exactly, something heavier than furniture, something that didn't want to move. Carter walked toward the staircase. Each step he took made the house respond. The wood beneath him creaked late, like the house was thinking after he moved. He climbed slowly. Second step, third, fourth. The upstairs hallway was darker than before. The flashlight beam seemed thinner here, almost consumed. The dragging sound came from the north corridor, the same direction as the wall. Of course it was. Carter moved forward. The sound stopped immediately. Too immediately, like it had noticed him. Silence. Heavy silence. Flashlight across the hallway. Doors lined both sides. All closed. All identical. Except the last one on the left. Slightly open. Just a few inches. Like an invitation that had been waiting a long time. Carter approached it slowly. His heartbeat was now the loudest sound in the house. He pushed the door open. Inside was an empty room. No furniture, no windows, just wooden floor and bare walls. But the walls, Carter stopped. The walls were not normal. The wallpaper was old, cracked, peeling in places. But underneath the peeling sections, there was something else. Not plaster, not wood, something dark, smooth, slightly moving, like skin stretched over bone. Carter stepped inside without fully realizing it. The door behind him closed softly. Not slammed, not locked with force, just closed, like the house had decided the conversation was over. Carter turned instantly. The doorknob was gone from the inside. Only a flat surface remained. He pulled. Nothing. He hit the door once, hard. Nothing. Then, knock, knock, knock. Carter froze. But this time, it was not behind him. It came from every direction, all four walls, at the same time. The room answered him. The walls began to vibrate. At first, it was subtle, a faint trembling under the surface, then stronger, like something underneath the house was shifting its position. The wallpaper began to stretch. Not tear, stretch. Like it was being pulled from the inside. Carter stepped back. Another knock. Then another. The rhythm was no longer random. It was coordinated. Like something was counting. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3. The room was learning. Carter raised the knife. Pointless, but instinctive. A section of the wall bulged outward. Then a hand pushed through. Not breaking, not tearing, just pushing through like liquid. Carter stumbled backward. Another hand appeared on the opposite wall. Then another, then another. The room was no longer empty. It was becoming occupied. Something was entering, but not through doors, through structure, through matter itself. The hands were pale, wet-looking, too long-fingered, as if they had been stretched over time. Carter backed into the center of the room. No, 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 no. The voices returned, not one, many, layered, overlapping. Carter, you are inside now. You always were. The house remembers you. We remember you. Carter pressed his hands to his ears. It didn't help. The sound was not outside. It was everywhere. The wall in front of him split slightly. A crack widened. Deliberate. Like something taking its time to enter correctly. A face appeared behind the surface. Not fully emerging. Just visible through the material. Carter's breath stopped. His grandfather. But wrong. The skin looked stretched. The mouth slightly too wide. The eyes too deep. Too aware. The lips moved. Carter, you came back. The wall behind Carter cracked loudly. A deep sound like wood breaking underwater. Carter turned. The entire wall was splitting open. Inside was not insulation, not wood, only darkness. But it was not empty darkness. Something moved inside it. Slow, heavy, patient, and it was getting closer. The house was no longer a structure. It was a passage, a living corridor between things that should never meet. The darkness shifted forward, and something stepped out halfway. Not fully formed, not fully visible, but enough. Enough to understand it had once been human, or something pretending to be. Carter dropped the knife. It made a small sound on the wooden floor. The house lights died instantly. Everywhere. Total darkness. And in that darkness, the walls finally breathed. The darkness did not arrive suddenly. It spread. Like ink bleeding into water. At first, Carter still knew where the room was. He could sense the shape of it. The edges, the corners. Then even that disappeared. The mansion was no longer a collection of rooms. It had become something continuous, something without clear boundaries. Carter stood frozen where the knife had fallen. He didn't try to pick it up. He didn't even know if down still meant anything in this darkness. But he could still hear, and that was worse. Because the house was breathing now. Not wind, not structural movement. Breathing. Slow, deep, all around him. Carter whispered, "This isn't real." But the moment he said it, the walls responded. A low vibration passed through the structure. Not a sound, a reaction. Like the house had heard him, like it understood him. Then came the voice again. Not one voice, many, layered. "Carter, you are already inside." The words did not come from one direction. They came from everywhere at once. Above, below, beside him, inside him. Carter stepped backward instinctively. His heel touched something soft. Not floor, not wall. Something in between. It moved slightly under his weight. He jerked his foot away. The darkness shifted. And then he saw it. Not clearly, but enough. A shape forming where the wall used to be. Tall, bent, too thin in some places, too dense in others. Like a human outline drawn incorrectly by memory. It did not walk. Forward, not touching the floor, not needing it. Carter's throat tightened. His body finally reacted. He turned and ran. Or at least he thought he ran. In the dark, direction was an illusion. Every step felt like it went nowhere. The mansion stretched endlessly around him. Hallways that should have ended did not. Doors that should have been there weren't. The house was rearranging itself. Behind him, something followed. Not fast, not slow. Consistent, patient. Carter stopped suddenly when he realized something terrifying. The footsteps behind him were matching his rhythm. Every time he stepped, it stepped. Every time he stopped, it stopped. He turned sharply. Nothing visible, but he felt it. Right there, close enough that if he extended his hand, he might touch it. "Who are you?" Carter shouted. Silence answered first. Then, his grandfather's voice again. Soft, calm. "Carter, you were always the difficult one." Carter's breath broke. "That's not him," he said aloud. "That's not him." But the voice didn't argue. It only continued. "We tried to keep the house quiet, but it wakes up when it is remembered." Carter backed away. "Stop talking. You are standing where we all stood." Carter turned and ran again, this time faster. But the mansion had changed completely. The hallway he entered did not match the hallway he left. The walls were closer, too close, as if the house had narrowed itself just to fit around him. His shoulder brushed a surface that was not wood. It felt like skin, warm, alive. He pulled away instantly. Something inside the wall moved in response. A soft, dragging sound followed him. Not chasing, accompanying, like it was part of him now. Carter reached what he thought was the staircase, but the stairs were gone. Only a slanted wall remained. He touched it. Solid. No exit. Behind him, the voice returned. Not louder, closer. "Carter, you are walking deeper." Carter spun. "I didn't come here for this." A pause. Then, "No one does." The darkness behind him shifted. The shape appeared again, closer than before, more defined. Now Carter could see details. Not fully human, but made from human pieces that did not belong together anymore. A shoulder too high, a neck too long, a face that looked almost correct until you focused on it. Then it became wrong again. The eyes were not eyes. They were openings, like holes drilled into something that once had structure. The creature tilted its head and spoke again, not as a single voice, but as many speaking through one throat. "We are the space between walls." Carter stepped backward. The wall behind him responded immediately. It was no longer passive. It was aware of his position. The surface shifted slightly, like it was preparing to open. Carter realized something horrifying. He was not inside a house. He was inside a system, a structure that used houses as skin. The creature moved closer, slow, certain, and with every step it took, the house reacted. Walls tightened, ceilings lowered, corridors compressed. Carter was being guided somewhere, not hunted, directed. He ran again. This time he didn't choose direction. He just moved. Anywhere. Somewhere. But the mansion corrected his movement every time. Every wrong turn became a wall. Every corridor ended instantly. Every escape folded back into itself. Finally, he reached a door. The only door that felt real. He grabbed the handle. It turned. Unlocked. He pulled it open. Cold air rushed in. For the first time, he felt something outside the house. Real night air. Snow wind. Freedom. He almost cried from relief. He stepped forward and stopped, because outside was not the world he remembered. The forest was wrong. Too still. Too symmetrical. From each other. Like they had been arranged. Not grown. And beyond them, more houses. Endless rows of identical houses. All identical to Ashwood Manor. Carter stepped back instantly. The door behind him closed softly again. Not locked, not forced, just closed. Like it had never opened. The voice returned one final time. Calm. Patient. Now you understand. Carter turned slowly. The creature stood inside the hallway behind him, closer than ever, almost touching. And it said, "There is no outside anymore." The house leaned inward, not physically, but conceptually, like reality itself had shifted weight. Carter backed into the wall. It was warm now, breathing again. The crack appeared beneath his hand, the original crack, but it was no longer small. It was widening. From the inside, something was pressing outward, not breaking in, breaking out. The creature spoke softly. "You are the next door." The wall behind Carter opened slightly, just enough to show darkness inside, and something waiting. Carter tried to scream, but the house entered his mouth before the sound could leave, and the walls closed gently around him, like a decision being completed. Carter did not experience arrival. There was no moment of landing, no sensation of impact, no clear boundary between before and after. Instead, there was gradual dissolution of orientation. The idea of standing vanished first, then body, then room. What remained was awareness, scattered, stretched, and unevenly distributed across something vast and internal. At first, Carter thought he was blind. Slowly he realized the truth was worse. There was nothing to see in the traditional sense, because seeing required separation between observer and object. Here everything was already connected. He was inside the structure, not inside a room, inside the system that produced rooms. A low pressure of awareness surrounded him, as if the house itself had become a thinking membrane. And Carter was now part of that membrane, a fragment that still remembered being separate. The first thing he felt was temperature. Not cold or warm, but directional temperature. Different zones of existence carried different emotional weights. One section of awareness felt heavy, ancient, unmoving. Another felt restless, vibrating with unfinished patterns. Another felt empty, like something had been removed from it recently and had not yet been replaced. Then came recognition, slow, unwanted. The house was not one structure. It was layered containment architecture. Thousands of overlapping versions of itself, stitched together across time. Each version slightly different, each version unstable, each version containing something that was not supposed to escape. Carter's awareness drifted involuntarily toward a region that felt more solid than the others. The north wall, the original anchor point, the source of structural weakness. He felt it like gravity pulling his scattered consciousness together, moving at all. Memories surfaced. Not his memories, the house's memories. Construction, wood being placed, measurements being taken, men speaking in low voices, and beneath them, something else, already present, already watching, before the first nail was hammered. Carter's awareness tightened. The north wall was not just part of the house, it was a seal, a containment surface, and it had been failing for a long time. He saw flashes of previous cycles, not as stories, as structural events. Every 30 years, pressure increases. Every 30 years, containment weakens. Every 30 years, something inside attempts partial alignment with the outside. And every time, the system tries to correct itself. But correction requires sacrifice. Fragments must be absorbed. Awareness must be redistributed. Carter felt a sudden shift. Something inside the system noticed his awareness stabilizing too much and reacted. Pressure increased around him. Not physical pressure, interpretive pressure. Like the house was trying to decide what he was supposed to become. A warning echoed through the structure. Not sound, protocol. Containment instability detected. Reintegration required. Carter felt a pull, strong, directional. Something was trying to drag him toward a focal point. He resisted instinctively, and the system responded instantly. The environment tightened, not aggressively, correctively, as if resistance itself was an error state. Carter felt parts of himself drift away. Not lost, reassigned. Fragment of awareness remained near the basement. Another near the attic. Another somewhere inside the walls between floors. He was no longer one consciousness in one place. He was multiple partial observations distributed across architecture. And then, he saw it. The north wall, fully, not as wood, not as structure, but as a living interface. A surface made of compressed memory, failed containment layers, and repeating structural attempts to hold something that refused to stay contained. And inside it, something familiar. His grandfather, but not alive, not dead, paused, caught in structural recursion. The face appeared within the wall, like a memory refusing to stabilize. Its mouth moved, slowly, but sound did not reach Carter. Instead, meaning formed directly inside his awareness. Carter, you are spreading too far. Carter tried to focus. Grandfather? The system distorted the attempt. Names are unstable labels. Carter felt the wall react. A slight shift, like attention itself was pressure. The grandfather's form flickered, then stabilized briefly. We tried to stop it, but the structure adapts faster than control. Carter's awareness fractured again. Another shift. The system was correcting imbalance by distributing him further. He felt himself extend into adjacent architectural zones. Hallways, ceilings, closed rooms, every space receiving a portion of his awareness. And through that fragmentation, he saw other things, other occupants, not ghosts, not intruders, but failed integrations, been partially absorbed in previous cycles. Some still repeating movements endlessly inside walls. Some frozen in rooms that no longer existed in the physical version of the house. Some whispering without sound, trapped in layers that no longer connected properly. Carter understood something horrifying. He was not the first consciousness to be distributed this way. He was simply the latest unstable iteration. The system spoke again. Not a voice, a structural instruction. Convergence node approaching instability threshold. Then, a new sensation. Outside interference. Carter felt it immediately. A knock. Not inside the system, from beyond it. The north wall vibrated. Not physically, but in coherence. Knock. The entire structure reacted. A deep correction wave passed through the house. Knock. Carter felt resistance from outside, attempting alignment. Knock. The system struggled, and for the first time, Carter felt something like panic from the structure itself. Not emotion, instability. The north wall began to crack across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Not breaking, failing. Carter was pulled toward it involuntarily. All fragments of his awareness converging toward a single point of structural stress. He saw it now. A second version of the house, aligned to just beyond the wall. Almost identical, but wrong in subtle ways. And inside that version, something standing in his shape, but stable, complete, fully integrated. The other Carter looked at him and smiled. We are almost synchronized. The system attempted emergency correction, but it was too late. Structures had begun alignment. And Carter understood the final consequence. If synchronization completed, there would be no distinction between inside and outside. No house, no containment, only what was being contained. The grandfather's voice returned, fragmented. Carter, break the alignment, but the instruction collapsed mid-transfer. The system rejected contradiction. The wall cracked further. Light, non-physical, poured through, and the entire structure shuddered. Not breaking, not collapsing, rewriting. Carter felt himself being pulled into the breach, and at the same time, pulled out. Two directions, one consciousness. The house was trying to decide what he was supposed to become, a fragment or a key. And in the final moment before full alignment, Carter understood something simple, terrible. The house had never been alive. It had been waiting for something that could survive being divided. And Carter was the first thing that did. The wall opened, completely, and the system stopped distinguishing between versions. Carter did not notice when the forest stopped being the last layer of reality. There was no clear boundary, no transition point, no moment where one world ended and another began. It simply expanded. At first, the trees were still there, snow still fell, Ashwood Manor still stood behind him like a forgotten thought. But something in the air had changed, not visually, structurally, like the world had quietly switched from one version of itself to another without announcing the update. Carter kept walking forward, not because he knew where he was going, but because staying still now felt like being observed too closely. And observation, he had learned, was dangerous. The forest did not resist him anymore. It guided him, subtly, almost gently. Paths formed slightly ahead of him before he reached them. Branches shifted just enough to allow passage. Snow compressed in ways that made movement easier. It did not feel like escape. It felt like routing, as if something was directing him through a pre-calculated path. Carter stopped once, then immediately felt the environment pause with him. He stepped again. It resumed. That was no longer coincidence. That was confirmation. The system was not just present, it was active in real time, and it was aware of him. A thought formed in Carter's mind, uninvited. If the house spread, where does it end? And immediately, the answer came, not in words, in structure. A sensation of expansion, like his awareness was briefly pulled upward through layers of reality. He saw it, not visually. The forest was not an isolated environment. It was one node, connected to others, like branching extensions of the same underlying architecture. And beyond it, something larger. Cities, roads, buildings, all faintly overlaid with the same repeating structural pattern. Carter felt his breath tighten. No, he whispered without meaning to, and the system responded. No denial accepted. Continuity established. Carter staggered slightly. The ground beneath him felt less stable now. Not physically, conceptually. Like the idea of ground itself was becoming optional. He forced himself to keep walking. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time was beginning to lose consistency again. Then the forest ended, not abruptly, gradually. Like reality had decided to stop pretending it was only trees. Carter stepped forward, and suddenly there was a road. A real road. Asphalt, faded markings, electric poles stretching into distance, and silence. Different kind of silence. Not forest silence, urban silence. Controlled absence of noise between systems. Carter froze, because this transition should not have been possible. Forest to road meant distance. Distance meant separation. But there had been no separation, only continuation. He looked back. The forest was still there, but now it looked edited. Too clean at the edge, like it had been cropped, cut out of something larger. Carter stepped onto the road slowly. Too normal. That was worse. Normal meant integration. He looked ahead. A small town was visible in the distance. Lights, buildings, signs. Everything seemingly intact. But Carter already knew. Intact was not the same as unaffected. He began walking toward it. The air changed as he moved. Temperature shifted slightly. Sound returned in fragments. Far-off electrical hum. Distant traffic that felt slightly delayed. Like audio playing half a second behind reality. As he approached the town, something strange happened. The streetlights flickered. Once, then again. But not randomly, synchronously, all at the same time. Carter stopped. The flickering stopped instantly. He moved again. They flickered again. Carter's stomach tightened. This is not a place, he whispered. It's a layer, and the system confirmed. Urban node detected. Partial synchronization active. Carter stepped into the town. Immediately, something felt wrong. Not visibly wrong, functionally wrong. People were there, but their movements had slight inconsistencies. A man crossing the street paused for a fraction too long before continuing. A woman at a shop window turned her head slightly too late after seeing something. A car passed, but the sound of it came half a second before it appeared. Carter slowed down. Every step he took now felt like it was being registered. Not by people, by the environment itself. He looked at a nearby building and saw it, a faint vertical crack. On the wall, same pattern, same shape. Carter backed away slowly. More buildings revealed similar marks. Not damage, replication. The system had reached here too. It was not contained to the forest. It was distributed. Across infrastructure, across perception, across human environments. A low sound began to rise, not audible at first, but present. Knock. Carter stopped instantly. From everywhere, knock. The town reacted slightly. Lights stabilized, movement corrected. Knock. Carter realized something horrifying. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a location-based anomaly. It was a global correction field activating in partial regions, and he was inside one of them. He looked at the people again, and noticed something worse. Some of them were not fully consistent. Like versions of them were misaligned slightly between steps. Small errors in continuity. The system was not only spreading, it was rewriting. Carter whispered, "They don't know." No response, because knowledge was not yet distributed evenly. He moved through the streets slowly, each step feeling heavier, not physically, structurally, like the world was gradually increasing resolution around him. More detail, more alignment, more control. A shop window reflected him as he passed, but the reflection was slightly delayed, and for a fraction of a second, there was another Carter standing beside him in the reflection, but not in reality. Carter stopped immediately. The reflection corrected itself. Just him, again. But the image stayed in his mind. He wasn't alone in the system anymore. He was a variable it could replicate. He continued walking toward the center of town. The cracks were more visible now. On walls, on roads, on glass. Thin vertical lines appearing across structures. Like reality was developing stress fractures. Knock. Louder now. Not one source. Distributed across the town. Carter stopped in the middle of the street. People around him slowed. Not because they saw him, because the system was recalculating around his presence. He looked up, and for the first time, he saw it clearly. Not sky, not clouds, but layers. Multiple overlapping versions of the town, slightly out of sync. Like reality was rendering multiple states of itself at once, and Carter was the point where they all intersected. A voice formed behind his awareness. Not human, not emotional. System continuity node identified. Carter closed his eyes, because now he understood Part 6 completely. The system had not expanded. It had been expanding all along, and Ashwood Manor was just where he first became aware of it. Now he was inside the wider structure, and the structure was waking up. He opened his eyes. The town was still there, but no longer stable. Everything was waiting for synchronization, and somewhere beneath everything, the knocking continued. Patient, persistent, unstoppable. Carter didn't fall into darkness. He was absorbed into it. At first, there was still awareness, a sense of where up was supposed to be, a sense of his own body. Then even that began to dissolve. The mansion was no longer a place with rooms. It was a continuous structure of pressure and silence, not empty, occupied, everywhere at once. Carter tried to breathe, but the air felt divided, like it belonged to something else first, something older than lungs, something that had learned breathing long before humans existed. He tried to speak. No sound came out, not because he was silent, because sound itself felt unavailable. The house was not blocking him. It was absorbing the possibility of him expressing anything outward. And then, the voice returned. Carter, not loud, not close, just present, everywhere. He froze. The darkness around him began to shift, not visually at first, but structurally, like the space itself had remembered how to move. A pressure formed behind him, not footsteps, not presence, awareness, something noticing that he was still functioning. Carter tried to move. His body responded slowly, like motion was now an outdated concept. Each movement felt delayed, as if the house was deciding whether to allow it. Then, a shape formed ahead of him, not arriving, not walking, becoming visible through the dark. Tall, unstable. Its outline was wrong in ways the human brain struggled to interpret. Too many joints. Too few stable proportions. Like a memory of a person reconstructed by something that had never seen a human correctly. It did not approach. It did not need to. The space between them collapsed on its own. Carter felt it closer without it moving. Then the voice came again. Layered. Carter, you are inside the old design. Carter's thoughts struggled to form meaning. Design? He tried to think, but even thought felt slow, heavy. The presence responded as if it heard the attempt. Everything that exists here was built to hold us, not to keep us out, to keep us in. The darkness behind Carter shifted again. He felt directionless movement around him, like corridors forming and unforming without physical structure. The mansion was reorganizing itself around his awareness. He realized something terrifying. The house was not a building. It was a containment system, and it was no longer functioning properly. The shape in front of him tilted its head slightly, and for the first time, Carter saw something like detail. Not full clarity, but fragments. A shoulder that looked like it had been broken and reset too many times. Skin that was not skin, but something that mimicked it poorly. And the face was almost human. Almost. But every time he focused on it, it shifted slightly, like it refused to be observed in a stable form. The voice continued. We used walls because people trust them. They build their lives against them. They sleep beside them. They forget that walls are just thin agreements. Carter felt something brush behind him. He turned instinctively. Nothing visible. But the sensation remained. Like something had passed through him without needing permission. The voice softened. Your grandfather understood this too late. The mention hit him harder than anything else. Carter's mind flickered. Grandfather. The warning note. Never sleep near the north wall. The memory felt distant now, as if it belonged to another version of himself. The shape moved slightly closer. Still not walking, still not stepping, but reality around it adjusting. It spoke again. He tried to seal it, but sealing requires separation, and there is no separation inside a connected structure. Carter felt a shift beneath him. The ground, if it could still be called ground, responded. It was no longer stable. It was becoming layered. Like multiple versions of the same floor existed slightly out of sync. His balance failed briefly. Not falling, just losing reference. Then, a memory surfaced. Not his, not fully. A moment of the house before it was what it is now. Construction. Wood being placed. Walls being closed. But behind those walls, something already there. Watching the builders. Waiting. Carter gasped internally. The house was older than its construction. It had been used as a container. But what it contained was not fully sealed. The shape reacted. You are remembering correctly. Carter tried to resist the thought process. But resistance itself felt like movement inside the system. The walls around him responded instantly. Pressure increased. Not physical pressure, conceptual compression. Like the idea of space was tightening. Carter felt his sense of self begin to fragment slightly. The voice spoke again. Calm now. We do not need your fear. We only need your recognition. The darkness ahead opened slightly, not like a door, like a wound in reality. And inside it he saw rooms. Not one, many, stacked, overlapping, different versions of the mansion existing simultaneously. Some empty, some occupied, some with shapes moving slowly inside the walls. In one version, Carter saw himself, standing still, already inside. In another, he saw the house completely sealed. No movement, no life, just silence. In another, the walls were gone entirely, and something enormous was unfolding outward. Carter stepped backward, instinctively. The shape behind him moved closer instantly. Not aggressive, corrective, as if preventing him from leaving the intended observation zone. The voice returned. You are not the first to reach awareness, but you are the first to remain conscious long enough to interpret it. Carter's mind struggled. What are you? He thought. The answer came immediately. We are what remains when structure learns it was never empty. A pause, then softer. And your house was weak. That word, weak, echoed. Carter felt something shift again. The mansion was reacting to itself, not just him, but internal instability, like something had been contained here for too long without proper sealing. He realized another truth. It was already inside. It had always been inside. The house was simply where it was most concentrated. The shape extended something like an arm, not fully formed, but suggested. Carter felt the air around it distort, not physically, but in meaning. The arm pointed toward him, and the voice changed tone. Now you will understand the structure from within. Carter tried to step back, but there was nowhere left that felt like back. The space had stopped behaving like a room. It had become directional without geography. The walls around him began to close inward again, slowly, not crushing, guiding. The shape spoke one final time. Not as many voices now, just one. Clear. Carter, you are the next wall. And the darkness folded inward, not violently, not suddenly, but completely. Like a page turning itself. And Carter was no longer standing in the house. He was part of it. Carter did not realize when the town stopped being a town. It did not collapse. It did not disappear. It simply stopped behaving like a place that was separate from anything else. The streets, the buildings, the sky above, everything felt like it had reached a final stage of coordination. Like reality had finished preparing itself for something that had been coming for a very long time. Carter stood in the center of the town, and for the first time since Ashwood Manor, nothing moved incorrectly around him. That was the most terrifying part. Because instability had become normal, and now normal had returned. Perfect normal. The kind of normal that only exists right before something becomes irreversible. He looked around slowly. People were still there, walking, talking, living. But now Carter could see them differently. Not as individuals, as partial alignments. Each one slightly out of sync with something deeper beneath reality. Like they were all running slightly outdated versions of the same system. A cold thought formed inside Carter's mind. They are not aware. And immediately, the system responded. Awareness not required for participation. Carter closed his eyes for a moment, because now he understood. This was never about ghosts, never about houses, never about one place being wrong. It was about structure itself. Reality had a hidden layer, a correction layer, something designed to maintain consistency across all existence. And when inconsistencies appeared, it adjusted, not through destruction, through integration. Carter opened his eyes again. The sky had changed, not visually, structurally. Clouds were no longer clouds. They were layered, repeating patterns stretching across the entire atmosphere. Like a blueprint being projected onto reality itself. And beneath that, something enormous. A lattice. Infinite. Every point in space subtly connected to every other point. Not physically, functionally. A system too large to be seen fully, but impossible to ignore now. Carter took a step forward. The ground responded instantly. Not shifting, aligning. The entire town adjusted slightly in response to his movement, like he had become the central variable in a massive calculation. Knock. It came once, not from a direction, from everywhere at once. Carter stopped. The sound was not loud, but final, as if something had confirmed that all systems were still synchronized. He whispered, "This is what the house was." No answer. But the system responded anyway. Partial interpretation. Correct. Carter felt something inside his chest tighten. Not fear, clarity. The house had not been the source. It had been a local expression of something much larger. A small containment node. A test region. A failed iteration of a wider system. And Carter had walked through it. He had been absorbed into it. And now, he was inside the full structure. The town around him began to shift slightly. Not breaking, aligning more precisely. People paused for fractions of seconds too long, then resumed. Cars stopped briefly at the same time across multiple intersections. Lights synchronized, not random, coordinated, and the world stepped back with him. He realized it immediately. He was not moving through reality anymore. Reality was adjusting itself around him. He turned slowly and saw it. A faint vertical crack in the air. Thin, perfect. The same shape he had seen in wood, in trees, in walls, in glass, now appearing in empty space itself. Carter backed away. More cracks appeared, not breaking reality, mapping it. Like the system was exposing its underlying structure layer by layer. And then, he saw them. Not reflections, not hallucinations, versions. Multiple Carters standing at different points in the town. Some near buildings, some in streets, some just standing still, observing. All slightly out of sync, all connected. Carter froze. One of them turned its head toward him, then another, then another. Not copies, not ghosts, instantiations, different iterations of the same variable across system layers. A voice formed behind his awareness, not loud, not emotional. Final system message. Convergence initiated. Carter felt the ground beneath him vibrate slightly, not physically, structurally. Everything was beginning to align. The town, the forest, the house, the sky. All of it, merging into a single coherent system state. Carter whispered, "So this is it." No answer, because answers were no longer required. Only completion. The other Carters began moving, slowly, not aggressively, drawn, like all versions were being pulled toward a central point. Carter felt it too, a pull, not physical, existential. Everything inside him was being drawn toward a single alignment point. The north wall was gone now, but the concept of it remained. A focal node, a convergence point, and now it existed everywhere at once. The system was collapsing all structure into one final configuration. Carter's breathing slowed, because now he understood the truth completely. The system had never been broken. It had been incomplete. And every cycle, every house, every town, every fracture, was an attempt to reach completion. And Carter was the final missing alignment variable. The grandfather's presence returned briefly, not as voice, as memory of resistance. "Carter, don't let it finalize," but the system cut the signal instantly. Interference resolved. Carter felt something shift inside him. All versions of himself were now merging closer. The town around him was dissolving into layered structure. Buildings losing definition. Sky collapsing into pattern. Reality itself becoming a single unified surface of repeating geometry. Carter stood in the center of it, and for the first time, he was not afraid. Because fear required separation, and separation was ending. He whispered, "If I am the last piece," the system responded, "you are the final alignment node." Carter looked up, and saw everything at once. Every house, every forest, every version of Ashwood Manor, every timeline, every failed attempt, all converging, not collapsing, completing. And in that final moment, Carter made his choice. He did not resist. He did not submit. He understood, and understanding changed the outcome. He allowed the final convergence, not as surrender, but as resolution. The cracks in reality expanded, not breaking, connecting. Every fragment of existence aligning into a single structure. The other Carters merged into him, not violently, not painfully, like returning pieces of the same system to their original position. The town dissolved into geometry. The forest dissolved into pattern. The house dissolved into memory. And everything became one coherent field of structured awareness. For a brief moment, there was silence. Not absence, completion. Carter existed everywhere at once, not as a person, as a resolved state of the system. And then, the system stabilized. No more cracks, no more knocks, no more instability. Only structure. Perfect, infinite, and final. Somewhere inside that stillness, a faint thought remained. Not loud, not important, just lingering like an echo that refused to fully disappear. I remember being inside a wall. And then, even that thought dissolved, because walls no longer existed as separate things. Only one system remained, and it had finally finished correcting itself.